You were red, and you liked me because I was blue, and you touched me, and suddenly I was a lilac sky, but you decided purple just wasn't for you. God, take me back to Tumblr. If that quote didn't immediately give you flashbacks, then congratulations, you probably weren't chronically online in 2015 and probably live a very normal life now. But for those of us who had those lyrics as their wallpaper for just about every single electronic device that they owned, and probably consider getting them tattooed on themselves, then you're probably like me, who's currently obsessing over the fact that Halsey is taking us back to the Badlands in 2025. I've actually been thinking about Halsey a lot lately, especially since the release of their latest album, The Great Impersonator. And yes, the fact that it's been 10 whole years since the release of Badlands. Ah, yes, the trials and tribulations of aging. But despite genuinely releasing some really great music and pushing their own artistic boundaries, it kind of feels like people don't give Halsey the respect that I think they deserve. And I'm sick of it. I'm fucking sick of it. I get that people can dislike Halsey's music, that's fine, but sometimes the criticisms feel a little bit more personal than that. It just seems like people have a lot of anger towards them as a person rather than the music itself. And I think there's a lot to unpack in that, especially how Halsey was kind of sacrificed to cringe culture and really hasn't been able to shake that off, even 10 years later. So I've got my trusty notes here with me, and I am ready to dive all the way back into the Badlands. And side note, if you didn't know, Halsey goes by she, they pronouns, but I will predominantly be using they, them pronouns while referring to them. We are the new Americana. Ooh, high on legal marijuana. I am not a good singer. Sorry, everyone. You might laugh at the lyrics of New Americana now, but listen, back in 2015, that shit was blowing up. It was truly the Tumblr anthem for the depressed girls, gays, and theys. Like, we were winning at that time. Okay, we had Lana Del Rey, Marina the Diamonds, Troye Sivan's Blue Neighborhood, and of course, Halsey. God, we just didn't know how good we had it, did we? In 2015, it was actually almost impossible to be on social media and not know who Halsey was. Lyrics and videos from songs like Ghost, New Americana, and Colors were everywhere. Like, Halsey literally had the internet by a chokehold and really kind of was one of the first internet big artists. And it wasn't just a niche internet thing either. Badlands debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200. Halsey was in many ways the biggest artist of that time and was literally selling out arenas at the age of 21, which is kind of wild because a year before, no one really knew who Halsey was outside of the Tumblr world. Not to mention that Badlands is one of the few albums to have every song on it be RIA certified gold, platinum, or multi-platinum, which is a pretty incredible feat. Personally speaking, I was the perfect audience for Badlands. Let me tell you, I ran my Tumblr account like the goddamn Navy, okay? That thing was locked in. I was also a closeted high school drama nerd, so yeah, I was literally the target demo for Badlands. Like, I was primed to be a Halsey fan. And my God, it just enveloped my whole life. I was truly obsessed. Every single thing about Badlands I poured over. I'm talking lyrics, songs, music videos, outfits Halsey would wear, the wigs, the colors. Oh, I was doing a lot. I should have been doing my homework, but I was doing all that. I think it had to do a lot with the fact that Halsey represented this sort of rebellious, mischievous, angsty outsider who was queer and didn't really feel like they fit in. Badlands was in every way a form of escape for both us and Halsey. Halsey said that Badlands actually refers to their state of mind when they were writing the album when they were 19. They also said that Badlands was a concept album that focused on the fictional dystopian society known as the Badlands. The album was a place for Halsey to escape from their real life struggles, and that's how it felt for us fans too. Halsey actually recently tweeted that Badlands is an album I wrote about a terrifying and imprisoning state of mind. I was relieved and horrified to learn how many of you could relate. Oop. Sorry, girl. Sorry about that. Yeah, I related. They then said that 10 years means 10 years that you've made it. You've done it. This day is for you and how far you've come. Okay, Halsey, let's not make me sob right now, okay? That is... woo! But despite its commercial success and its deep connection with fans, the critics did not love Badlands as much as we did. Pitchfork, who have a very checkered history with Halsey, which we will get more into later, tore Badlands and Halsey to shreds. They gave it a 4.9 out of 10. And the review said, reading interviews with Halsey, you get the sense of a canny and talented performer, one who legitimately wants to connect with fans, but the public persona only comes through on Badlands in fits and starts, and there isn't a single subversive or original second on the album. Whoa! Before adding that New Americana, like most of Badlands, is calculated, defiant, and ultimately hollow. Yikes. Now, what if I told you the reason that I think Halsey gets so much hate is because they got so overwhelmingly popular? I know that sounds so cliche to be like, oh, they got really popular and everyone's jealous and tall poppy syndrome. But I really do think that there is something with female artists in particular being oversaturated and then hated on because they got popular. Like, that's their fault. Especially because Badlands' commercial success pushed Halsey out of the confines of the internet world that they were so accustomed to and so welcomed and embraced into, out into the world of the unknown. And because of that, people didn't really know how to respond or understand Halsey. Halsey spoke the language of Tumblr, and Badlands seemed so perfectly created and fit into that internet world. So of course it would seem cringe or annoying to people who weren't part of that. Especially for those who already had a disdain for Tumblr culture and just assumed that we were all annoying, liberal, blue-haired weirdos who are obsessed with pronouns. Which strangely is still an accusation that woke people get, even though Tumblr is long dead. Rip though, I do kind of miss Tumblr. Not the really toxic side, and those who know what I'm talking about. But I kind of miss just reposting Hunger Games quotes and being like, oh my god, I love Katniss Everdeen so much. Anyways. But if we want to examine how cringe culture impacts Halsey, we need to take a step back and actually examine what cringe culture is, where it comes from, and why it's such a pervasive tool in society to cut people down. I think that cringe culture really cemented itself when social media platforms took over our lives. Like, I am more than sure that people before the 2010s were routinely weird and cringe and annoying and just doing really odd things, but they weren't always documented and posted online for every single person and their goddamn dog to see. Being cringe probably wasn't really even the forefront of their mind. They were just doing what everyone else was doing or what they thought was cool. A lot of people attribute cringe culture to Gen Z because obviously we were the first generation to grow up alongside social media and kind of have it as an inbuilt part of our adolescence. And because of that, we assume responsibility for deeming what is cool and what's not cool on the internet. The social media age really started taking off at the same time that millennials were trying to figure out who they were and what their identity was. So naturally, they were forming it around these early internet ideas and values, thus birthing the entire Tumblr personality. And then all of a sudden, here comes Gen Z stomping down the yard and telling everyone that you're all cringe and weird and like, why do you have a mustache tattoo? That's really odd. Weird girl, cringe girl. It's even gotten to a point where like it's almost seen as cringe to be a millennial. But like, what are millennials meant to do about that? You know what I'm saying? Like, they're already millennial. That's just their personality. We can't just kind of claim that they're all cringe because they're millennials. That's kind of wild. And also, we're annoying too. And while cringe culture was really strong between like 2015 and 2018, I think it's gotten really insidious in the past 5 years, especially with the rapid rise of TikTok. Because at the time, cringe culture was largely sort of kept to celebrities like Halsey, but nowadays it feels like cringe culture is ruining our lives. Genuinely though, it literally feels like the first thing that people have in their minds before they're about to do anything is, oh my god, will this be perceived as cringe? Am I cringe? Is this cringy? It's an exhausting way to live, and I've been trying really hard in the past few years to really break free from that internal fear that I'm going to be cringe. In her article for Lifestyle Inquirer, Leah Gutierrez writes about what she calls the cringe culture crisis and how it's actually prevented her from doing what she wants and what she wants to achieve. She references an interview by the ABC with one of my favorite authors, Ocean Vuong, where Ocean says that he can tell when he's teaching students that they're holding themselves back because of cringe culture.
There's a kind of surveillance culture around social media, and they would say, I want to be a poet, I want to be a good writer, but it's a bit cringe.
Leah writes in her article that participating in cringe culture is the act of trading earnestness with irony. It can easily be summarized as a fear of vulnerability, a fear of intimacy, and a fear of advocating for oneself. I know this because I am marred by it, and with its resonance comes recognition. My aversion to sincerity is inextricably linked to my performance of gender and my post-colonial identity. Eleanor Bernard also wrote a really great article about cringe culture for The Guardian titled, Dear Gen Z, Take a Lesson from this Zillennial, To be cringe is to be free. In it, she argues that resentful boomers are actually the ones who started cringe culture as a way to make fun of millennials. Before the younger, meaner, and far more tech-literate younger siblings, Generation Z came along. In the case of Halsey, which poor diva has not had a break since the start of their career, it was music critics and insiders basically saying that Halsey's cringe and vapid and vain. But then they started to face the cringe accusations when Gen Z started getting online and who didn't really know Halsey before the Chainsmokers song. So baby, pull me closer in the backseat of your Rover. Obviously, there were those of us who were absolutely addicted to Tumblr and teen angst back in the day, and we knew Halsey all the way from Room 93 EP. So if your introduction to Halsey was quite literally the Chainsmokers song Closer, I don't necessarily blame you for thinking that they're cringe. Because you obviously weren't involved in the Tumblr world where you would understand what Halsey was doing and what they kind of stood for. And all you knew them from was a song that really stays in here, you know? And not in a good way. It's the aversion to sincerity that cringe culture comes from. You can't be seen as trying too hard or genuinely caring about something. And Halsey still to this day will be accused of being a tryhard or wanting something too badly. As Eleanor writes, to be perceived as earnest is a fate worse than death for the self-conscious or a farming zoomer, which leads them to lash out against those who do not follow the rules of their anti-cringe world. And again, that is such an exhausting way to live your life. And the funny thing is, as Eleanor points out, that this too cool exterior is a prison of our own making. Why can't we just embrace the things that make us who we are, even if they are a little bit cringe? I also think it's really fascinating that we almost retrospectively critique something as cringe, even if we participated in it, which is really what seemed to happen with Badlands, because there was such commercial success, and then all of a sudden everyone hated Halsey. A lot of that has to obviously do with personal shame, because I don't think people want to admit just how much they adored something as seemingly cringe as Badlands. And at one point, we were all angsty and annoying. It was 2015, okay? It was cool to listen to edgy or angsty artists that made you feel like you were an outsider and no one understood you. But instead of actually accepting that mayhaps you were once cringe, it is so much easier to be like, oh my god, ill Halsey, oh my god, Badlands is so cringe, ill, gross, grossest thing ever in the world. Hate them, hate myself. And I was one of those people too, okay? I was so desperate to fit in that I stopped listening to Halsey altogether. I didn't listen to Badlands or Hopeless Fountain Kingdom or even Manic. But could you imagine the whiplash that artists like Halsey would feel after like years of success and then all of a sudden everyone just hates you for really no apparent reason? That's why I think that Halsey is the biggest scapegoat to cringe culture. I struggle to find any other artist that has been so plagued by cringe accusations for more than a decade. I know so many people who just don't like Halsey, and it's not even because of the music. They just don't like them. I think it's probably because we've literally been conditioned to see Halsey as uncool. Not even exaggerating, there's videos with thousands of views that's literally just titled Halsey Cringe Compilation. Or there's even this video from 7 years ago which just tears Halsey apart, claiming that they're pseudo deep and just a Tumblr artist. It has 3.5 million views. And yes, I know there are so many examples to pull from. We have the cursive singing, which by the way, everyone was doing that at the time, but suddenly Halsey sung in cursive and then they need to be crucified for it. Also, not every song on Badlands sounds like that. There are actually quite a few that show Halsey's vocal range and ability. Oh god, then we have that fucking infamous mall video.
Don't waste your time on me, you're already the voice inside my head.
Which, may I add, Halsey did that before Badlands was even released. It was before Halsey was a mega artist, okay? So like, yeah, it's super random why are you singing in a mall, but that was all like unplanned and it was just a hangout Halsey had with some Tumblr fans at the time. I would be scared too to be put on the spot and sing. You heard me sing before. And yeah, it looks awkward and random because it is, but it's also earnest. And oh god, we cannot forget about the time that Halsey maybe incidentally called for a second 9/11. That's a crazy sentence. So after another shitty review from Pitchfork after the release of Manic in 2020, Halsey tweeted, "Can the basement they run Pitchfork out of just collapse already?" Now listen, unfortunately for Halsey, who did not know at the time, Pitchfork operates out of the One World Trade Center. So by implication, Halsey did somewhat call for a second 9/11. Obviously, they had no idea and said as much as they tweeted that they were trying to poke fun at them with the same passive aggression they poke artists with. I mean, that literally could not be more perfect comedy writing if it tried, but my God, did people drag Halsey through the mud because of it. Another thing that Halsey consistently gets shit for is the whole try-by labeling shit show that was going on. So way back in 2015, the New York Times tweeted their interview with Halsey, saying the singer Halsey identifies as tri-bi, bisexual, bipolar, and biracial. For those who don't know, Halsey's father is black and her mother is white. Naturally, Halsey got memed to fucking oblivion about the whole tri-bi label. But the thing is, Halsey never actually referred to themselves as that. In fact, Halsey retweeted the original New York Times interview and said, "Love you, but this is absurd. None of these things I identify as. They are what I am. This is a crude misquote." Then in an interview with Rolling Stone in 2016, Halsey said that they fucking hate the tri-bi label, saying the idea that something like that would be trivialized down to a fucking hashtag. I mean, there's a ton of biphobia. People refuse to accept bisexuality as an actual sexuality. And I'm biracial, but also white passing, which is a unique perspective. So these kids say, "Oh, fucking try-bi Halsey. She never miss an opportunity to talk about it." Halsey then went on to say that 6 months ago, you were begging for an artist that would talk about this shit. But then I do, and you say, "Oh, not her, someone else." And almost a decade later, that's still incredibly true. Even while I was doing research for this video, I stumbled across a now archived Reddit thread in the Halsey Reddit titled, "Why do people hate Halsey?" And here are some of the responses. She does say some pretty dumb shit. I think she's great, but she's a little full of herself, while somehow being completely oblivious to how she's actually viewed. She pronounces D's in a stupid way. Okay. She comes off as full of herself and as a real asshole. I feel like she has bad taste in men, but so do a lot of young people. Thank you for that. Because she's sold out, and she has changed her appearance so much with plastic surgery, she's barely the same person. The giant fake tits are off-putting. Okay. I'm late, but almost every article I see about her, she's complaining and whining about something. She's a professional victim. I liked her music, but she's so insufferable, always complaining. Feels like she's always playing a victim. Not her liking tweets against her ex, Evan Peters. Evan broke up first, and she became bitter about it. Now, I see a lot of people critiquing Halsey for liking a shady tweet about their ex, Evan Peters. But that's because he retweeted a post relishing the fact that a Black Lives Matter protester was being tackled to the ground by police. And again, reminder, Halsey's father is black. So yeah, Halsey's probably gonna be shady to the fact that their ex, during the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, was relishing in the fact that a Black Lives Matter movement protester was being tackled to the ground by police. There's a lot more Halsey cringe moments like the fan interaction when Halsey was doing press.
Not for nothing, but I'm getting a lot of really rude messages right now from people saying that I'm fucked up and I swerved you and I'm being rude and I'm being mean. Like, not for nothing, but I've been in press since 8 o'clock in the morning. I have a whole day of interviews to do. I'm still doing them. I would never just walk by you and not meet you. So to abuse me like that online is kind of fucked up.
Or the whole G-Eazy relationship, really. But if you actually want to go deep in the Halsey lore and sort of understand more about where all these scandals and things happened and their place in history, Ashley Norton did an incredibly detailed video about that. I really recommend you watch it. I'll link it down below, but check that out. So yeah, there's a lot of things that people routinely hold against Halsey. But Jesus Christ, can we not let the person move on? Was Halsey annoying? Maybe. But weren't we all annoying? Aren't we all annoying? I truly think that Halsey was just trying to be themselves and figure out what fans wanted from them. I can't imagine how hard it would be to have so many people hate you simply because you are who you are. And then you continue to try and make music because you genuinely care about the artistry and really hope that fans connect with it. But all anyone can ever bring up are the cringy things you did when you were like 18, 19, and 20. And it's worth pointing out that Halsey was already incredibly popular before the release of Badlands. They have a wild digital footprint, and I'm sure we would all be embarrassed by the things we posted in 2016. But Halsey isn't allowed to grow up and evolve. Even in 2025, people still view Halsey as the annoying Tumblr artist singing in a mall with pink hair over a decade ago. Halsey's association with being cringe kind of died down in the years following the release of Manic. At least we didn't really hear much about what Halsey was up to as we had between 2015 and 2020. But that doesn't mean that Halsey stepped away entirely from the public view. In fact, only a year after Manic was released, Halsey released their 4th studio album, If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, which is not only an incredible album title, but also an incredible album. Even Pitchfork, who, as we know, do not like Halsey, gave the album a 7, which is the highest they've ever rated a Halsey album. In that review, they said, instead of sieving these themes through an elaborate architecture, Halsey lets horror of the body, of the mind, of mortality radiate outward. The result is alluring and spectral. It's their best work yet. Which for Halsey, that's a glowing Pitchfork review. But because of all the cringe allegations and how saturated Halsey was in the years prior, people really skipped past the album and I don't think ever really gave it the flowers it deserves. If one thing is true about Halsey, it's that they will always put the time and effort in to making sure their albums and bodies of work are as detailed and immaculate as possible. Halsey unveiled the cover art at the Met, made an entire film for the album, and did it all while they were pregnant. And yet, people outside the fandom didn't really seem to notice or care. But maybe that's why it felt so peaceful, because Halsey was able to deliver something straight to the fans, which was kind of the first time they've been able to do that without interference of the mainstream public since before Badlands. But then the cringe allegations started creeping on back in during the rollout of their 5th studio album, The Great Impersonator. But this time the allegations manifested themselves differently than they had in the past. Instead of being accused of being cringe or singing in cursive, this time they were being accused of being a tryhard. To promote The Great Impersonator, Halsey did an 18-day countdown to release date, where Halsey would unveil a different impersonation of a different icon, and the song off the album that was inspired by that artist. As a fan, I thought that was a cool as fuck concept. And listen, some of these impersonations were genuinely uncanny, but central to the album was Halsey grappling with their own mortality as they were diagnosed with lupus and a rare T-cell disorder. Halsey genuinely believed that The Great Impersonator would be the last album they would ever be able to record, meaning it's incredibly raw and very honest about Halsey's life. Yet, people took issue with the impersonations. I saw people online use it as proof that Halsey is yet again a tryhard and can't be original, or they were doing too much, and yes, in fact, that Halsey's impersonations were cringe. Being a tryhard is another label that absolutely will cut you down, and it's so wrapped up in cringe culture, because you can never actually be seen to be wanting to try to do something. Somehow you have to be perfect, but you have to be cool doing it, and you can't be seen to be trying to be perfect, otherwise you're a loser. And yeah, Halsey's a tryhard because they actually care about their artistry. They care what their fans think, and they care how their art is received. Why is that a bad thing? I want my artist to give a fuck. As Addison Rae, another artist who is routinely accused of being cringy and a tryhard, recently said,
everybody's always like, oh, she's trying too hard this, she's trying. How about you try it all? You can tell you're not.
Yes! That is energy that we need, queen. And then came The Great Impersonator reviews, where the label tryhard then became turned into having main character syndrome. This time, instead of random teenagers online saying that you're cringy, you have grown-ass men trying to review The Great Impersonator saying, I think Halsey has main character syndrome. Of course, I'm talking about Pitchfork's abysmal The Great Impersonator review and the Needle Drop Guy's video about the album. And listen, I believe that genuine music criticism is needed. I think we need more arts and music journalism that isn't actually afraid to critique things, because otherwise it all just becomes a glorified ad. However, I do not think these reviews of The Great Impersonator had anything to do with the music at all, but had so much more to do with Halsey as a person. And at that point, you are not a music critic. You're a Halsey critic. Pitchfork wrote, although they're a great curator, a brilliant singles artist, and a hugely compelling performer, they've never presented a coherent vision of who they are or what they want to say, even in the broadest sense. At her best, Halsey grinds nostalgia and modernity into a homogeneous pulp. Then the review goes on to say, at other times she writes about pain, adopting a martyr's pose, but because that martyrdom is self-ascribed, it also feels profoundly unrelatable. Before later asking whether Halsey is just trying to conjure a sense of victimhood to make listeners feel bad. Bro, she literally thought she was gonna die. And most of the critiques came from the fact that Halsey didn't sound like the artist they said that they were impersonating. The Needle Drop Guy went as far to say that Halsey would never make an album that was as good or revolutionary as any of the artists Halsey impersonated, and would never sound like them.
You know what? I regret to fucking inform you there's not a single goddamn second on this album that sounds like Fiona Apple, Kate Bush, or Björk.
He then went on to say that he was sent press packets saying that Halsey channels the spirit of Stevie Nicks in performance of Panic Attack, to which he goes,
she wishes.
Now listen, I also got sent those press packets, and not for 1 second did I think that Halsey was going to open her mouth and sound like Stevie Nicks singing Rhiannon, okay? Nor was I personally offended by that. That was a marketing choice and largely just referred to the fact that Halsey's vibe and atmosphere of the music video was sort of like a 70s flowy, beachy vibe like Stevie Nicks. Halsey also didn't say that they're going to be a tribute artist. They literally just said that this particular artist inspired a particular sound or style on this song. One of the impersonations is literally Badlands Halsey. Are you going to say the Halsey doesn't sound like Halsey from 10 years ago? It really just gives me the energy of those guys who goes up to girls who are wearing like Nirvana shirts and say, oh yeah, name 5 songs then. Again, Halsey literally thought they were going to die, and then here's men saying that because Halsey doesn't sound like Bjork or Bruce Springsteen, that they're a bad artist. Like hello? While the Pitchfork review was bad, the Needle Drop Guy's review of The Great Impersonator was perhaps one of the most ill-informed things I've ever seen. It also literally proves the point of what Halsey's trying to make on the album. He asks,
why does every goddamn song on this record sound like it's being written from the perspective of some troubled girl character, or I don't know, one of those like Delaney Rose skits on TikTok where she's pretending to be a character in some coming of age movie?
Which Delaney Rose routinely kind of makes fun of the girls who are bullied for being cringe. See how everything about Halsey kind of comes back around to being cringe? And then we get to the crux of his argument, which is when he says,
this entire record has the worst case of main character syndrome.
She thought she was gonna die. Like, hello? One of my favorite comments probably ever on the internet is actually under this video, and it says, fellas, is it main character syndrome to be diagnosed with cancer? Halsey speaks on the album about not being believed by several doctors and experiencing medical misogyny. And then here we have men telling them that they're being too dramatic and trying to get sympathy from fans. But the accusation that Halsey is lying for attention or to make people feel bad is not a new one, because people have long accused Halsey of lying to get attention. And these are actually some of the things that people have accused Halsey of lying about. Having a black father, which there's several photos of Halsey's father. I don't know how or why Halsey would lie about that. Being bisexual, absolutely no one's business about what Halsey's sexuality is. That Halsey lied about being homeless and having to couch surf from when they were around 17, pretty much up until the release of Badlands, despite speaking about the experiences several times. But perhaps the most egregious thing is that people accused Halsey of lying about having several miscarriages. Halsey has spoken very candidly over the years about having endometriosis, experiencing 3 miscarriages, and also having a life-saving abortion. Halsey said that one of these miscarriages occurred just before they're about to go on stage for Vivo Live, which I could not even begin to imagine how harrowing that would be. But instead of believing Halsey and supporting them, people took it upon themselves to accuse Halsey of lying about having a miscarriage because they instead had an abortion. And went so far to show up at a show at Toronto holding up bloody baby dolls, which would be so fucking re-traumatizing. These constant accusations that Halsey was lying about their entire existence is just a way to discredit them, not only as an artist, but as a human being. By doing so, it's so much easier to accuse Halsey of trying too hard, or of forcing themselves to be something they're not, or being cringe, than it is to actually just critique the music. Maybe that's because the music's not actually as bad as people make it out to be just because Halsey made it. And all of this is to say that I think that these critiques of Halsey are rooted in misogyny. As D'Angelo Wallace points out, these critiques The Great Impersonator had nothing to do with the music itself and everything to do with Halsey as a person. They were just all so focused on tearing down Halsey, their identity, and their experiences, and invalidating all of that just because they believed Halsey didn't sound like Stevie Nicks enough or was being a little bit too dramatic. And that's why I think, as a whole, cringe culture is misogynistic. When you think of someone being cringe or a tryhard, chances are you probably think more of women than you do of men. That's not to say that men can't be cringe, because believe me, they absolutely can be. But it seems like women face more accusations of being cringe than what men do. Men are not so easily wounded by the blows of cringe culture. When famous men are accused of being cringe, like Ed Sheeran, Adam Levine, Justin Timberlake, Drake, Coldplay, One Direction, G-Eazy, Maddie Healy, Halsey or 21 Pilots, they're able to move past it a lot easier than women are. It doesn't stick onto them in the way that it sticks onto women and sort of haunts them and follows them around everywhere. The cringe allegations just don't seem to be anywhere near as fatal. Whereas when a woman is accused of being cringe, like Halsey, it just seems like a very convenient way to dogpile all this shit onto them and kind of have thinly veiled misogynistic remarks about them. It's very clear to me that people just don't like Halsey as a person, and it has very little to do with the actual art that they create. What do all of the following people have in common? Rachel Zegler, Miley Cyrus, Lena Dunham, Olivia Wilde, Lorde, Brie Larson, Jennifer Lawrence, Anne Hathaway, Florence Pugh, Addison Rae, Halsey, Jennifer Lopez, Millie Bobby Brown, Amber Heard, Taylor Swift, Ariana Grande, Jojo Siwa, Camila Cabello. You've guessed it, they're all women and they've all been accused of being cringe. There's a whole ass IMDb page dedicated to ranking the most annoying female actresses, and even a list for the top female celebrities who are weird, crazy, annoying, stupid psycho. And they were modified just a few weeks ago. Although there is an annoying male actors list which honestly just says under construction, but the men aren't labeled as crazy, weird, stupid, or psycho. The article by Leah Gutierrez that I mentioned earlier, Leah writes, cringe culture, like imposter syndrome, is a suppression of power. It is a conditioning that tells you that you are not worthy or enough and instead contracts you to conformity and obedience. Leah then goes on to bring up a New Yorker article by Leslie Jamison, who spoke to a psychologist, Pauline Rose Clance, who was credited with using the term imposter syndrome as imposter phenomenon, saying that to call it a syndrome would be to direct attention away from the systemic ways in which women, particularly women of color, have been made to feel as though they don't belong. In short, the feeling of being an imposter is an external force with its own history of oppression and inequality that many have learned to internalize in thought and behavior. I think the connection between cringe culture and the imposter phenomenon, especially where mostly women, are made to feel inadequate or inherently out of place, incredibly fascinating. It's also what I think happened to Halsey. I truly feel like the biggest crime that Halsey has committed was being herself. Were they annoying at times? Sure. Were they cringy? Maybe. But who cares? They were being authentic and trying to be as earnest and real as they possibly could have been. Like, could you imagine people continuously bringing up the stupid shit that you said and did when you were 18 years old? Oh my god, I would leave the public forever. Which is actually something that Halsey considered. Halsey wrote on Tumblr in 2024 that my own fans are hands down meaner to me than any other people on the planet. Not speaking for all of you, of course. Me. But it used to just be a minority that were awful to me, and now it seems like a majority have only stuck around to chime in occasionally with their opinion of how much they hate me or how awful I am. It is hard to want to engage in a space that is completely devoid of any kindness, sympathy, patience, or, to be honest, human decency, especially after years of hiding from the interactions for fear that this exact thing would happen. I don't know, man. I almost lost my life. I'm not going to do anything that doesn't make me happy anymore. I can't spiritually afford it. Fair enough, Queen. I wouldn't be making shit ever again if I even got half of the criticism that Halsey has gotten over the past 10 years. But then again, that is why I'm not a pop star. And yet, throughout all of that, Halsey has continued to do what they believe is right. In 2020, Halsey started a Black Creator Fund. They wrote an essay in Vogue about overturning Roe v. Wade. They donated $100,000 to Planned Parenthood. They've spoken at women's rallies. They've helped people on the streets when they were pepper sprayed during the BLM protests. And they've also recently gone on tour wearing a port implant each night, literally showing up for their fans when their life hangs in the balance. And what does Halsey get in return? Being called cringe, a try-hard, attention-seeking main character syndrome wannabe Tumblr artist. A super unfortunate part of the whole internet just deciding to hate Halsey out of nowhere and accuse him of being cringe is the fact that they've missed out on some genuinely incredible bodies of work. Albums like Manic and If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power and The Great Impersonator are some of the strongest work that I've seen from a pop artist. They have strong songwriting, conceptual themes, and are all really sonically different from one another, and really showcase Halsey's talent as an artist. That's why it's really cool and refreshing that 10 years later, Halsey's going back into the Badlands era. Having blue hair again, making new music videos with the old characters from your old music videos to like add more to the lore, and just all around really leaning back into that album. It makes me feel like they didn't turn their backs on the person who made Badlands despite being mercilessly slated for it. It makes me feel like I too can say fuck it and just lean back into the annoying, cringy shit I did when I was 15 years old. I mean, I was a theater kid for Christ's sake. Everything I did was cringy. But listening back to Badlands all these years later and out of some of the turbulence that I was going through at the time it was released, I still really fuck with that album. Drive and I Walk the Line are still my fave songs from that album. And like, yeah, some of the lyrics are a little bit cringe, but I don't really care. And it makes me really sad that people can't enjoy them because of cringe culture. So will Halsey ever not be seen as cringe? Will they ever get the flowers that they deserve? I'm not sure. It does sort of seem like the tide is slowly turning, especially given the response to the Great Impersonator reviews. It seemed like a lot of people, even those who wouldn't call themselves Halsey fans, rushed to their defense in these awful reviews. Even just seeing how excited people were for Halsey's 10 years Badlands anniversary album and merch. Even the Badlands World Tour that Halsey announced is selling tickets like crazy. They're even selling out several cities and having to add new shows. And yet we're meant to believe that Halsey is just a try-hard Tumblr artist with main character syndrome who's making all their fans feel bad. I guess it just took almost dying for Halsey to be appreciated and somewhat respected within the music industry.